Today we're going to be doing an overview of the Wakanda Platform. I'm calling it All-in-One as the title, and it's going to do an overview of building web applications with Wakanda. And the reason I'm covering this topic is I've had a lot of conversations with existing Wakanda developers and new people who have said, you know, it's great to have the training resources, but what I really need is I need a way to communicate in a distributed fashion what Wakanda is and what it can do for our organization. So if you're a Wakanda expert, a lot of this may be repeat for you. I will say that our next topic, our next webinar will be on WebSockets, which is a new topic, a new feature in Wakanda 9. So stay tuned for that. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to go through a really wide scope of what Wakanda is all about and go from there. So let's get started. By the way, my name is Greg McCarville. I'm the Director of Business Development for Wakanda. And I do a number of our webinars, so many of you will be familiar with me. So what's the agenda today? I'm going to do an application architecture overview, both on a traditional stack as well, and put it in comparison to what you'll experience with Wakanda and where the advantages are and what we're targeting to do with this product. I'm going to go through some features and some code examples to give you an idea of what it looks like to work with Wakanda. Most of them are server-side examples at this point. I think actually before that I'm going to do a live demo with Studio just to give people a flavor for what it's like to work with Studio, which is a free product that we put out that allows you to build Wakanda applications in a more visual manner. I'll do an overview of deployment options, and there's several of those. I'll go over what I think are some of the ideal use cases for our product. I think every product that is doing what it should be doing has specific goals and specific targets. And then we'll go through again, as usual, questions and feedback. If you have any questions, there is a mechanism in the software to enter questions. Feel free to go ahead and enter those at any point. I'm not going to tackle any of those until the end, so they'll just get logged and we'll go from there. So what's a typical web application stack look like? And if you've done web applications in the past, this will probably look familiar to you. We'll start from the back end. You have a database. Some common ones would be MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server. More modern would be a document store like Mongo, or you have a lot of NoSQL databases that have been coming and taking prominence. Each of these red indicators here, those are assigned to me of where you need to do some wiring between these different technologies. And when I was doing web application development, I always found that this was one of the areas that was most challenging. So between your database and server code, there's some translation or some libraries or different ways that you hook up to these things. And I always found this to be a pain point. But server code, examples of that would be Java, PHP, Node, or Rails. And there's a whole huge amount of options there. From server code, you're normally interfacing with a web server. Two popular examples would be Apache or Nginx. And again, you have a layer of complexity in between these where you're learning how to interact between your server code and your web server to serve up these pages. Then we've got a larger gap here, and this is between the server and the client side. So this would be the browser typically, you know, in what we're talking with today. It could also be a mobile application, but let's talk, I'm going to talk in terms of browser-based web applications, and on mobile, perhaps something wrapped in PhoneGap would also work with this scenario I'm laying out. So quite often, if you're building an actual application, not necessarily a public-facing marketing type site, a lot of people are working with MV star type libraries. Good example would be Backbone, Angular, Ember. Kendo has an MVVM. So these are model view. Essentially, a lot of them offer data binding. A lot of them offer synchronization with a client-side model. So these are libraries that are very popular. Libraries often need to be hooked up to. A lot of people choose to use a widget set when they're building a web application. Some examples there. So it's widgets and view tools, things like Bootstrap, which would give you some layout and styling. Kendo UI is a full widget set. Some other well-known ones would be DX, HTML, and Widgmo. So this would be another layer, and again, each of these steps requiring some sort of integration. And then you're to your final destination, which is either a mobile wrapper like PhoneGap or Cordova, or there's a number of them now, AppGyver, or you've got a browser-based application. So this whole sequence here, it can be quite complicated. You know, there are different offerings that simplify certain aspects of this. For instance, you could take Kendo, takes care of a lot of the client side, as well as EXTJS or Accenture or one of these types of things. And likewise on the server, there's some trends now, such as backend as a service. But what I would say about the traditional stack is it can get complicated, and you're usually learning multiple languages. And this was one of the areas that we identified with Wakanda as a place where we can make some improvements. So if we look at the Wakanda platform, it's pretty easy to digest. We have, sorry about that. We have a relational NoSQL data store. So it's a relational data store that uses, instead of SQL, it uses a JavaScript type syntax, which you'll be seeing. We have a very fast JavaScript engine and an industrial grade web server, all packed together and very nicely integrated together into what we call Wakanda Server. Across the board, you're going to get consistent JavaScript syntax, both server side and client side, so you can learn JavaScript along with web standards and really get everything done that you need to get done. Between the server and the browser, we have an automatic REST interface that's created. So when you build a model in our relational data store, there's a REST interface all stubbed out for you that you can utilize. And our client-side framework uses that REST interface out of the box. You can access it directly with other frameworks as well. But on the client side, we offer also a client-side data management system, which would be an MV star type setup, which offers data binding, different view helpers and functionality. And we also offer full widget set for both mobile and desktop. And again, we try and keep a consistent JavaScript API between the desktop and mobile. It's a highly integrated and consistent experience. And this is one place where we think we can really improve your workplace, improve your productivity, is by reducing the number of technologies you need, and also creating that workflow that's highly integrated and a lot more put together. So as opposed to another popular JavaScript server-side technology, Node, for instance, we actually include a ton of features out of the box. Whereas in the Node world, you're doing module after module after module. We've included most of the basics that you will need out of the box, such as HTTP. We've got a full file and folder system API. You're going to see access to the database, data modeling, authentication, and permissions are all in there. We've got APIs for working with images and blobs. We're just introducing WebSockets. Both Wakanda Server can be both a client and a server. Email, you've got session management, web workers. There's events on all of the data store functionality. We're just introducing over the next while our own cloud, so you'll have one-click deployment from Studio. In the Studio, we've got Git version control built in. There's a buffers API, and we've also got database connectors for MySQL, Microsoft SQL, ODBC, and more are on the way. That's in our enterprise version. So what's it like to work with Wakanda? I'm going to give a few random examples. I think first off, I'll go through Studio and give you a flavor for building a very trivial application, just so you can see the workflow. Studio is not required. It's a tool that we do offer for free. It gives you a visual environment to work with and build a Wakanda application, but you're welcome to use whatever IDE suits you best. They're all standards-based files, so you can use Sublime Text, Vim, or Eclipse. You name it, As long as it can work with those standards-based files, then you're good to go. So we've got in Studio not only a visual editing mode, it's a code editor as well. Like I said, we've bundled some version control. There's testing abilities, debugging, and you can even manage the server from Studio. So let's take a look at Studio. So this is Wakanda Studio. I've got version 8 up, which is our current production version. I'm going to just go ahead and create a new solution. I'll call it My App. I've got a choice here. I'm going to add a project to this solution, and I'm also going to add a Git repository. So what a solution is essentially a server setup. You can have one solution per server machine, and you can have multiple projects per solution. So I could create a second project called My App 2. It would serve it up on a different port, and you could have those hosted together on the same machine. The thing I'd like to point out at the solution level is the directory. I'm going to show you how we work with custom logins. You're more than welcome to put your user information into a Datastore class and manage that all yourself. Right now, I am going to use this. This is what we offer as a built-in authentication and permission mechanism. So you can just go ahead and create a new user. I'll just create myself with hello as my password. And I'll go ahead and create a second user. And right there, we've created 2 users. Now we can go to groups as well. There's an admin group by default. This helps you, this is basically an administration group for the server. So if you want someone to start and stop the server, they'll need access to this group. Let's add a group called registered users. And let's actually assign both David and Greg to that group. So that's the directory. You'll see how the groups play into the model very shortly. But that's a look at the directory. Groups can contain other groups. There's a lot of flexibility here as well. And you can also add and remove users from the directory using JavaScript with a programmatic API. Next thing I would explain is in the project, we have one special folder called the web folder. And this is everything within this web folder is publicly accessible. It is essentially your web server directory. So you can serve up static assets, dynamic assets. You can get into templating if you wanted to use a library like Mustache or Handlebars. There's a lot of flexibility here. But I'm going to first go ahead and just create a new JavaScript file server side. So this is not accessible through the browser, so I'll call it server side. And this is one of the things about Wakanda Studio that's very powerful, is it allows you a very agile development system. So I can go here and go ahead and execute JavaScript right against the server. So if we say just went var my number equals 1 plus 2, and then we can just output my number, and we can just go ahead and execute that against the JavaScript engine, starting up the server right now. So I'm running this server locally. Like I said, just like that, I've got a server that's working, and it gives me output 3 as the answer. So I'm going to use this during the demo real quickly once I have a model set up. So when we talk about building a model, I'll do a very basic visual version. I'm going to give you a look at the a JavaScript method of building a model. But for right now, I'm going to add a new Datastore class, and I'm going to stick with a tried and true model. We'll just do company, and I can add a new attribute. This will be name, and it'll be a string. So you see here, you've got all the data types you would expect. Numbers, booleans, blobs, images, you name it. So we'll just make this a string. And you can express over here, I can express both the entity and a collection. So I'm going to go companies, the plural, to make it more semantically correct for when I reference an entity collection. I'm going to add a second Datastore class, and we'll call this person. So this is going to describe a person entity. So we'll just do a few more attributes here. First name, string, last name, string, full name, which is a string, and let's do a birth date, which would be a date. So these are all storage attributes. I'm going to make full name a special kind of attribute. I'll go over here to script kind and JavaScript, and this is what we call a calculated attribute. So I'm presented with some events that I can then put programming into. So anytime that this attribute is requested from a browser or the REST interface or anything, I can go ahead and create a script. So it's going to stub out a place for me to write my code. So when model.person.fullname on get happens, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually return this, which is the current entity, dot first name plus space plus this dot last name. And just like that, I've got an attribute that's calculated on the fly as you need it. And this is good for lightweight operations where I wouldn't get into massive queries or anything really heavy in here, but it's a great convenience feature. If we go back to the model, we can do some interesting things here. Let's create a relationship. I'll create a new entity, and I'll call this the employer. And that's going to actually be a company. And by doing this, I can create a one-to-many that easily. Now, I probably should have changed person to people for the plural. And this could be called employees. So what this is saying is in the company Datastore class, I have a collection called employees, and that's going to be more than one person. And on the other side of person, we've got one company that's an employer. So let's go back to our server-side JavaScript. I'm going to reload the solution because I've made some changes to the model. If we go back to server-side.js, we can now do something like this. New ds.person, and we can go ahead and pass in first name, Greg, last name, Wilson. And you'll see that it's very much and what we'll do is we'll actually chain a save. You can see it's a JavaScript syntax. We're passing in a JavaScript object to set up our initial values. And we'll just go ahead and do ds.person.all, which is going to list all the people that we have saved in the Datastore class. So right here, we're doing a save command. So what we get here is we get a feedback. It's a collection. So we've got the ID, first name, last name, full names calculated. I didn't put in a birth date. Now, if it's important to understand the difference between entity collections and entities themselves. If I go here and just use array notation, and I take the first element here, I'll actually get rid of this and run that. You can see this is a different view. So this is telling me I've got one entity versus a list of things. And this is giving you immediate feedback. So we could do Bill Davies, do the exact same thing, except we'll return the collection. And you'll see, so it's going to give us a list, and we can really be agile here, keep track of what's happening, play with our data, understand our model right away, out of the box, execute code right against the server. I'm going to give you some more examples of that with the slides, but this is a powerful, powerful tool for developers to know exactly what's going on and be able to seamlessly get to that data store and back. So you can see here on the server side, I did no wiring to get my database understanding what I'm doing in my JavaScript API, and you're going to see when I go into the client side, it's just as straightforward. So let's build a very simple interface. This is not going to be anything to write home about, but seeing as I have 5 minutes, it's going to be pretty impressive for that time period. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to show you in our, this is now building the client side. So we're going to be building a browser interface. I'm going to build a mobile interface as well. Is we've got something called themes. So we have a default theme. So if I grab, say, a grid here and drag it on, you'll see that I have a certain look and feel. So I'm going to go ahead and change the design of the entire application just by clicking here. You can build your own themes. It's all CSS. We have community themes. This is a place where there's a lot of innovation that can come from the community. If we have some talented designers who want to share a theme, it can be a great resource. So we have something called data sources. These are a client-side representation of your data on the server. So I went ahead and dragged the company Datastore model onto this grid, and you can see it set up here. I'm going to take out, or I'll leave the ID for now. I can go ahead and just visually drag these around. I can go to styles here, change whatever properties I want, but I'm going to change the size and position. I'm going to actually make this and constrain it to both the top and bottom and then the right side. So when I resize this page, it's going to grow with the browser window. We'll go a little bit further. Let's take a container like this, and we can actually create a maybe a detailed view. I'll build as best an interface I can right now. So I'm going to actually change this. Companies would normally have a lot more data. But let's take these styles and let's actually constrain this to both sides. So it's going to grow both horizontally and vertically. This will be, say for instance, an input container. Right now we only have one thing to display. So the way that we get data binding working is we can select, this is a text input widget, and we'll just put this, this will be the name of the company. And we go in here into the source, and we can just go ahead and choose company.name, and now that will bind. So whenever we're changing the company in this list, you're going to get an updated name there. Likewise, let's go ahead and grab another grid. Actually, I'll put it inside of this container just to illustrate that these are going to be the related entities. So we'll grab another grid, go ahead and plop it in this container, and what we'll do is I'll grab this container and make it the full height of the page, go into styles and constrain it both top and bottom and just to the right. This grid, now you can do all kinds of things with these grids as well. If you go to properties, you can see that you can show and hide footers, headers, and do a lot of styling as well. And each of these have an ID, so I could call this the employees grid, and that will set the ID in your HTML. One thing I should mention when you're working with the client side is that we bundle jQuery into all of this. It's all built on top of jQuery, so if there's things that we're not offering in the IDE or in our API, you can go ahead and use jQuery and manipulate things as you see fit. So we're going to go ahead and create a different kind of data source. And you can use data sources for all types of reasons. Perhaps you have different selections of companies where one grid has companies that are active and one grid has companies that are past customers. And you can have different selections based on your needs and have multiple data sources per Datastore class. So I'm going to create what's called a relation attribute data source. I'm going to go ahead and choose our company data source, choose the employees. So I now have an employees source. I'll just go ahead and drag that onto this grid. So what's going to happen here is you're going to see that we'll be automatically creating relations on the client side. This is about the extent, due to time, that I'm going to go on interface right now. But let's go ahead and let's get this running. So I'll choose Run Project. And you can see here we've got our interface. As I size, it's just like I described. I didn't set up the grid, the related grid well. But let's go ahead and let's add a new company. So this will be company 1, company 2, and let's go ahead and with company 1, actually I'm going to need to fix that grid. I'm going to not hide footer, and I'm going to go to styles and make it bound to the top and bottom. So we'll save. I'll go back to my browser wherever that was. and we'll reload. And so now I can add, I've got company one, I'll add an employee to this. And we can choose a birthday and keep going through. So we've got Greg and Dave there. If we go to company two, we can add Pat Miller. And just like this, that quickly, I'm creating relationships. So you can see that I'm clicking between company one and company two. It's adjusting the related selection. I'm able to make adjustments. And this is actually, if I refresh, this is already writing to and from our server. So if I go here and pull up the JavaScript console and go to network, you'll see here that what these are doing through the data sources is actually creating REST requests to the Wakanda server. So this is the same REST interface that you have access to regardless of what you're using on the front end. So our front end widget set is really geared towards business applications. Perhaps you have a different purpose with your application, or you have a different preference for your front end. There's nothing stopping you from utilizing this REST interface and working with whatever you want on the front end. We've got some great integrations with AngularJS, for instance, and we're working on others. We're even looking, we've got some examples of creating, working with Kendo UI widgets right within Studio. So we're really working and being diligent about making sure that your options are always open, that the flexibility is there, but without giving up this tremendous ease of use that I'm showing you. We want to be a tool that can be effective for both building a quick and dirty internal application, and then also for professionals who are building public-facing, high-volume websites. So I think that's about what I wanted to show you on Wakanda Studio. There's a lot more to this product. It is extremely in-depth. We can go here, I'll push to GitHub, and I'll just put initial commit. Okay. You can see it's going to create. I've already got my GitHub repository set up here, so just my account. So it's going to create a repository for me and push this project up to GitHub. So if we go to my GitHub account, do a reload on my repositories, you can see right there is my app. So then I can go ahead and have other people collaborate with me, share applications very easily. This can work with, I believe, different Git service providers as well now. You can use Git on the command line if you don't enjoy our client. There's a lot of options for you. One interesting use is that you can actually use Wakanda server as a Git server within your organization. So if you're very, very sensitive about your data and your application getting out into the public, you can go ahead and use Wakanda server internally to push and manage Git. So that is Studio. Let's go back to our slides and continue on. I think I actually went out of the presentation, so I'll go ahead and present here. So that's, again, we're here to help. If you see anything here that you want more information on, we're happy to really work with you to make sure that this tool is everything that your organization needs. We offer training, we offer free help through our forum, and we really encourage you to reach out to us so that we can make sure you're being as productive as possible. So I'm going to show you just some examples of if we went a little further with Wakanda. Again, there's different levels. There's beginner, there's intermediate, and there's definitely advanced. And I wanted to show you sort of the next step. So you have two choices when you're designing a data model. I showed you a visual editor method. It's very popular. I think a lot of people choose to use that. And what it does is it generates JSON for you. Behind the scenes, it's a JSON editor, and then you build your methods, etc. in JavaScript. Now, one thing I should show you here as well is you've got access to a lot of different things in the model, and it's probably easiest to demonstrate that in Studio. If we go back to the model You'll see when I select a Datastore class is I've got events. And we can create functionality within all of these different events that happen in the life cycle of an entity. We've got, when a new entity is initialized, when it's loaded, validated, saved, when you delete it. One interesting one is on restricting queries. We actually give you a method that when a request hits your server, you can create a JavaScript method and return a collection completely customized to that request. So it gives you the ultimate flexibility on permissions, on authentication, and different fine-grained results that you want to create. Not only that, within this Datastore class, we also give you permissions based on those directory groups. So I could allow read to be wide open, but perhaps I only want registered users to be able to create, update, and remove. So I can go ahead and create these right in the model. So no matter which way you're accessing this, they're baked right into the base of your application. It's an incredibly efficient, convenient, and effective security mechanism. You can go ahead and create these different permissions on the entity level or the Datastore class level. So I've got public here for a specific attribute. I can make it public on server so that it's only available server side. We also have different attribute permissions here as well. So you can go right down to the attribute, really slice and dice your model, decide what's available publicly, what's never available publicly, and then you've always got the on restricting query to customize things to an even greater degree. We have the idea of server-side methods on your Datastore classes. We could create a method here. We can apply it to an entity, a collection, or a class. So we'll go ahead and make this a class one. And you can choose create JavaScript code here. You can also go ahead and specify the scope of this method by doing something like this, .scope equals, and we could do, for instance, public on server. So that would not be available through the browser. If I went ahead and changed this to just public, I can then access this through our client framework and easily execute functionality on the server just through one quick call. So if we wanted to design a data model with JavaScript versus the visual method, this is an example of doing so. You're creating a new Datastore catalog, then you're adding a data class, adding various attributes, and this is all documented. We have extensive documentation. I encourage you to start digging into that. There's a lot of information there. You can see here we're creating a relationship in code, and we have an extensive API to help you do all of the things that you would like to do with your model through JavaScript just as much as you would through the visual editor. And that's more just a preference, what your style and what your goals are. As I said, when you're building a Wakanda data model, you're automatically getting a REST interface. You can turn it off, but a lot of people find it useful. Remember, all of your permissions and authentication rules also apply to this REST API. So if you're using any of these front-end frameworks that you see here, or a plethora of other things, or even desktop applications, a REST API is a great generic way to be able to access the Wakanda server. We use it with our client-side framework, so we know that it's extremely extensive and definitely something that you can read up on and learn and get ultimate flexibility from Wakanda server as a backend for your applications. So here's some examples of adding and modifying data on the server side. I showed you a few of these, but here's just an example of creating a new entity. You assign it to a variable, you get a reference to the entity, and it will fill in first name as Barry as a default value. You can assign values to that variable then afterwards, just using dot notation. Here I'm persisting that same person to the disk. So you've got just a simple save call that's going to write it to the data store. Just as easy to remove, the person dot remove. And remember, each of these events, save and remove, will then fire your event-based code that you specified in your model. You can chain functionality like you would expect in JavaScript. So here we're in one step creating a new person. with a default first name Barry and saving that to the Datastore right away. Here's a look at adding a relationship to an employer. So we create a new company, save the company, create a person, and we just go ahead and assign the person.company this variable that we made in the first step. And when we save that person, that relationship is created. You can also do a lot of chaining within your data. So we've got, if we want to get a reference to the company name and we have a person variable, we can go ahead and do the person.company.name and chain right through and get to the values that we want quickly. When it comes to relationships, one of the powerful things we offer that I've not seen in a lot of databases is the idea of recursive relations. So I could go ahead here with person, and let's say that each employee has a manager. I can just go ahead here and choose person. And just like that, we could call this direct reports. That gives me access to hierarchical data. I could then call person.manager.manager.manager right up the chain. And this works into a lot of different data needs where recursive relations can be extremely helpful. So the one thing that I would really stress to you is the difference between, we've got two concepts, the concept of a collection and the concept of an individual entity. So here you're referencing a related entity collection. Employee collection equals the company.employees, and that will give us a reference of a collection, and we can do operations on that collection, such as length. We can iterate through these collections. We can do all kinds of things. So how do we query the data store? And these again are server-side examples. A lot of these, if we had time to look at the client side, it's very similar. You're not going to find a huge learning curve between creating queries through our data sources compared to the server side. There are some slight changes. For instance, you want to do asynchronous calls and things like this typically. So it's a slightly different syntax, but not a huge departure. So we can do a quick find by ID, just pass in the ID. We can do find by key. So this would find a person who has both the first name Mike and last name Jones. It would find all of those people. Here we would have finding any company that starts with comp. So if you were company 1, company 2, company 3, all of those would match in this find, or sorry, with a find, it actually brings back the first entity. So find will bring back one single entity, whereas query with the same arguments will bring back a collection, and that's the difference between query and find. We can order by, so here we're doing a query, order by name, descending. There's a ton of conjunctions and comparators, so you've got a lot of flexibility in your queries. Here's some examples of and, or, and here in these examples here, I'm using our placeholder syntax. So we've got placeholder 1, placeholder 2, and then after our query, we pass in those parameters. You can pass in arrays as data. So in this example here, we're going to query and return every person that has a first name Sam, Bill, or Dave. You can do JavaScript in queries. Generally, our query syntax is robust enough that you don't need to get into JavaScript, but if you had a need that couldn't be covered through our existing API, you always have access to allow JavaScript in your queries. So here's an example. We're doing a query for everyone who has a last name with a length greater than 10. And you can work with these collections very easily and put them straight into data. So I'll be showing you custom HTTP request handlers. To array, we'll just create a JavaScript array object out of this selection and give you that data object to then work with. Maybe you return it to the browser or whatever you wish to do with it. So here's HTTP request handlers. And I'm just choosing various features of Wakanda. There's a lot more to cover, but I wanted to give you, basically pique your interest to really invest in the product and learn it, because there's a lot here. There's a lot of flexibility, and that's the whole point of this webinar, is to get you past that point of commitment where you're willing to give it a fair try. And we're here to help you get through that. But here's, we can set up in a Bootstrap file and that's a special type of file that gets executed on server startup. So we're adding a request handler. We use regular expressions to determine our route. So this would be a match for your IP/my URL. We're telling it here that we want it to go into the scripts folder, to the routes.js file, and the function that we're going to use to handle this specific route is my URL handler. And then in that scripts.route.js file, we would just have a function like this. My URL handler, we get a request and a response object, which would be quite familiar to anyone who's using Node, and we can just go ahead and return the response once we've done our work. This is a look at part of the request object that you get from Wakanda. All kinds of great information here. You can figure out the requesting domain, you can figure out all of the body contents, headers, you name it, and do whatever you want with your requests. Again, we offer a lot of automated functionality for people who don't want to get into this level of fine-grained detail, but we never want to exclude advanced users, so we've offered this type of functionality. The built-in REST API, this is just a quick look. Again, very extensive. I'd ask you to really dig into it if this is of interest to you, but here's just a look at some examples of the syntax that we use. So you access the REST interface with a leading REST. These are two for authentication, so $directory is a special key, log in, and in the body you pass your username, password. You can get the, does this user belong to a certain group? You can get different information from your server, get information on the server in general, the catalog, which is your model, how Datastore classes are made up, and introspect exactly what you have as far as the model. You can define on your server side what is visible from the browser and or from the REST API and what's not. To work with data, here we're just accessing an entity directly. Here we're doing a filter on company for names that begin with C. There's a lot of pagination and tools to help you work with the data in the way that you need. This is calling a server-side method from REST, or sorry, this one here actually. This is updating a person entity, and you would pass the JavaScript object or a JSON object in the body. Here's calling a method, publicly accessible method, mind you, from the on the server from REST. So it's full-featured. Again, you can work with entity collections. You can save collections, a lot of tools for pagination. You can expand into child entities. And again, I just recommend you read the full documentation. Custom authentication. There is a very easy way to authenticate, which I showed you with the directory. We have API calls from our client framework that make it really simple to do authentication. But if you wanted to do something custom, you can go ahead and set up what's called a login listener and essentially do whatever JavaScript you want upon login. And this is going to affect every login. As soon as you try to log into the system, you essentially define your function that handles logins, and you give it a permission group. In this case, I gave it admin. So just a quick run through. You get a username and password as your parameters, obviously. So we're going to go through here and we're going to check if this is the system admin. We're going to return false, and what that does is it actually reverts back to the built-in directory and tries to use it to authenticate. And else you can set up all your rules. If the login's successful, ultimately what you want to do is return a user object, which has a user entity ID, it has a name, full name, and an array of groups that it belongs to. So this is a quick look, and of course you can return an error. This is a quick look at doing custom authentication. Gives you freedom to do whatever you need to do on when authenticating. So you have advanced options. Again, I said you can use whatever editor you choose. You can build a model in JSON or JavaScript. It's all standards. So the files are HTML, CSS, JavaScript. You can remotely debug. I didn't even really show you. We have a built-in debugger in Studio. You can use the Chrome debugger. There's a lot of options for helping you debug your code and understand what's going on. You can integrate third-party widget sets generally quite easily. Um, and you can connect to other data systems. Like I said, we have connectors for various other databases, and more will be coming as time passes. So what are the characteristics of Wakanda Server? So Wakanda Server is a multi-threaded environment. Unlike Node, you can go ahead and put this on a multi-core, big, beefy server machine, and it will vertically scale out of the box. Like I said, we have an extensive API that's included, so you won't find yourself running, looking for modules all the time. It does work with CommonJS modules, so there is the option to definitely extend with those. And again, one of the things that we really like is that the server side is very tightly integrated. So easy to use, in fact, that I think it's a good competitor for a lot of these backend as a service, except that you own your back end when you use Wakanda. So what are your deployment options? Studio works on both Windows and Mac. Deployment works on Windows, Mac, and Linux. So you can deploy on your own hardware. You can use any of the popular VPS providers out there. I've personally used Amazon Web Services with EC2. I've used DigitalOcean, Linode. There's a whole pile of them. You can choose what you like. Coming soon, we are in the midst of building a specific cloud. So it will be one-click deployment from Studio. That's going to be a great option, and we'll be announcing information on that as time progresses, but it's in internal beta right now, something we're pretty excited about. What are the ideal use cases for Wakanda? It's a very flexible tool, so it's hard to put it in a box, but I think that a few places where it shines is, say for instance, you had a website. You have an industrial grade web server sitting there that can serve up static assets. You can use templating with various different JavaScript templating engines. So it's great for building a public facing website with an administrative backend. That's one great use case. You can use our widget set for the admin backend, and you can use whatever you want on the front end, and you're going to have a very clean, easy to use solution. Internal applications. I think it's a natural for that. Distributing it amongst your team, having a common platform that can scale if one of these internal applications ends up becoming a critical piece of software to your business. It's nice to know that you've got a web server and a service that's both standards-based using modern technology and can scale if you need it to, but still fast enough and approachable for the most number of people within your organization to be able to utilize the tool and get results. So the other thing I think it's great for is a REST-based backend for either mobile, single page, or native applications. You can go ahead right out of the box, create a very flexible data model with a REST interface, and go ahead and consume that in a very short amount of time. So we do have an open source offering for open source projects, and our commercial deployment starts at $259 per year per server. We have an enterprise offering that we're working on the pricing and we'll have out soon. That's going to have additional features and additional functionality. So we'll stop here. I've been about 50 minutes. We'll go for questions. Okay, so we're talking about Oracle connector. Do we have it? Right now, our connection solution for Oracle is through ODBC. We are planning a dedicated Oracle connector. I don't have an ETA on it just yet, but it is on our roadmap definitely, and something we will do. But for right now, the ODBC is how we would cover that base. Okay, so we have one here. Yeah, a person has an app that's using server-side JS. All the web pages are generated from the server. Will kind of work similarly. Absolutely. I would recommend you take a look at our website at the quarterly update from just this past month. I did a quick example of using handlebars.js to generate code server-side and pass that out as a static page. So absolutely, you can do that. There is code hinting. Someone says, is there no code hinting when inputting JS? There is code hinting. I'm just so fast that you didn't see it. So absolutely, there's a lot of help in the IDE. Download it, give it a try yourself, and I think you'll find that it's actually quite extensive and good. Okay, can you easily create a find across all fields and data sources? Um, of course, anything's possible. Um, I think there's different ways you would approach that. For the person asking that, Bill, if you want to get a hold of me, by all means, I think we could talk about that in a more intimate context, and I could certainly help you out. Okay, JavaScript queries. How do you filter for security? Whoever asked that one, if you could be a little more specific, but I'll go over the security system a little bit again. JavaScript in your queries is a very specific use. We don't recommend it extensively being used. Um, there are mechanisms in there that actually have to get information. I haven't used it in quite a bit, but there are security mechanisms in there to make sure people can't be doing terrible things. But I think you'll find that the JavaScript inquiries you won't be using too often because our native query API is pretty extensive. But I can certainly get you more detailed information if you want to follow up with us on that. Where I would say that if you want to email questions for me to research more thoroughly and get you a more detailed answer, just wakanda@wakanda.org. That's our general email. Feel free to send it in and we'll get either tech support or myself working on that. Okay, we've got Willem. Is there a simple way to link to AD? I don't know what AD is, so if you want to add that to your question, I'll try and answer. Okay, is there a way to know in the required JS file from which project the request is coming? Interesting question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I'd recommend you email that one in. Okay. As far as deployment, got a question here, is it supported in Amazon or other clouds? We actually have an AMI in Amazon that you can use that will make Amazon deployment in particular super, super easy. But absolutely, I've tried this on many, many Linux VPS. I had a co-located Mac Mini for over a year that it worked flawlessly, and presumably you could put a Windows box online as well. And it's all that's one of the strong points with Wakanda is deployment is actually quite easy. Availability of reporting. This is an area that a lot of people request. We don't have a super great solution out of the box right now. What you can do as a solution is there are JavaScript libraries for creating PDFs. We've got some examples of that, people doing that in the forum, and that would be the way you would approach reporting right at this point. How can we see it is deployed in a VPS? I do have a webinar up on my YouTube channel that is youtube.com/Wakanda Screencasts. Unfortunately, with Wakanda 8, the mechanism for deploying to a VPS is a little bit different. I have one on there for both EC2 and DigitalOcean.com. It's on my to-do list to update those for Wakanda 8. I would think in particular for DigitalOcean, I'll be doing that this week. So keep an eye on that YouTube channel and I'll get something up there. How many developers have signed on to Wakanda? That's a tough question because we do offer an open source version. But I think the best way to get a gauge of that is get involved in the forum. Of course, that's only going to be a small minority of people. Not everybody gets involved in the community. But I can tell you one thing, we've got a lot of momentum over the last year, or 6 months in particular. As we keep going forward and introducing new technologies such as WebSockets is going to be a really exciting area. We've got some big announcements coming in the area of our widget set as well as our studio. So keep an eye on it. We are committed to this product. It's fast moving. We have a quite an aggressive release schedule. Generally quarterly we're releasing, and we would love to have you into our community and show you exactly how committed we are to this product. Asking about a Postgres connector. I don't know the status of that. Certainly it's a database that we're interested in. It's got a great following, so just the fact that it's widely used would make it a target for us, but nothing to announce at this point. I don't know that I'll make these slides specifically available. I can, I'll post something to the forum. They're on Google Drive, so I can make those available. But more importantly, this presentation will be available on our YouTube channel and through our website. So here's someone saying that they're a newer developer and they're looking for a more hands-on tutorial for building mobile apps. Definitely, I think that we've got some opportunities we can make available in training. I probably should have covered that a little bit, and I'll just do it quickly. In Studio here, if I went back to my index page here, if I want to make a mobile version of this, I just go up here to this button here, go to smartphone, and I can start building a mobile view of this same page. Now there's different ways of doing this. Some people prefer the same page setup. Some people prefer specific pages for mobile. So there's different ways you can go about this, but it's very similar skill set to build a mobile application as it is desktop. So I would suggest definitely we are looking at bringing our training to the next level. We do have a free training offering. If you go into our store, you'll see that there's a free 4-day training offering to get you up to, I would say, a beginner intermediate level of being a Wakanda developer. That'd be a great thing for you to invest in. And I don't know that it covers mobile specifically, but I think once you get those basics down, you'll be able to figure out the mobile here quite easily. One thing I didn't mention is we will be offering as well a phone gap extension, and I believe it's going to be the enterprise version to wrap up your application to be a native runnable application, available through the various app stores, etc. So I've got a question, Britt, wondering if we'll be able to discover and reverse engineer Microsoft SQL tables and relations. Good question, and I think I did ask Laurent that recently. I believe that it does reverse engineer and take a look, but the Microsoft SQL connector right now is not what we will be, it's not as complete as what we'll be offering in its final incarnation. So I have to check on an update. Britt, I've got your contact information. I'll keep this and get back to you for sure. Looking to authenticate against LDAP. Again, a request I've heard before. I don't have a specific example for you. It's something that I know is definitely in the scope, definitely we want to do. It's last time I checked, not on the roadmap, but I do know that we have resources working on it. So at this point, I'm going to have to put you off with a cheesy someday, but that's where we are right now. I will try and look, Brian, I've got your contact info from previous. I'll try and look into if there's solutions out there that can get you running in the short term. Okay, so again, more questions about reporting. We hear you there. Definitely something obviously our audience is demanding gets taken care of. So I'll press on that again and pass on to the higher ups that this is indeed something that's very important to our community, and re-mention that to them. Okay, just reading through a question here. Yeah, so the person looking to create a lot of so the question essentially is it easy to integrate and use JavaScript libraries such as D3, Famous, etc. within your Wakanda project? Absolutely. We have a lot of examples of people bringing in other, I have a D3 example actually, and generally speaking, if these libraries are built the way most libraries are, they work perfectly without a problem. So definitely takes a little experimentation sometimes, but even if you find a jQuery gadget of some sort out there, generally you can just drop that in and go ahead and work with it. Like I said, a lot of these third-party widget sets are even quite easy to integrate into Wakanda. So we've got a question, is this platform, can it be used for building App Store accessible hybrid mobile and desktop apps? Yes, it can. We've got a phone gap offering that we will be presenting at some point, Like I said, I believe it will be within our enterprise offering, but I think you'll see that fairly soon. Wakanda 9 release date. You know, with us releasing quarterly, I lose track, but I believe Wakanda 9's in beta right now, so I would say you're within 2 or 3 months of seeing that. Okay, does your debugger show more than just object error when using JavaScript? Yes, it should show you a whole pile of things. So if I go here to my server-side.js, let's just go ahead here and go debugger. I'll run that. I don't have my debugger running probably. Yes, I do. Hmm. I would have liked to have demoed that to you. I don't know what's happening. Normally the debugger will pop up for me, but if we go here, open debugger, we've got a fully featured debugger. This is the Wakanda debugger. You can use the Chrome debugger as well. It's whatever your preference is. There's a way to add watch statements to dig into all variables at different levels by expanding and collapsing menus. I don't have time to demo it right now, but absolutely, the debugger is actually something quite interesting to people. Got another question about Famous. Interesting. Actually, I've been looking at Famous a lot over the last couple weeks. I was finally got invited into their university beta, so maybe I'll do an example of tying in with Famous. That looks like something that people are mentioning. Okay. Okay, so we're looking at do we have testimonials and example sites? We do have testimonials and some example sites. I'll be honest with you though, at this point, the major projects that we're seeing are enterprise applications. That's where we're really finding the bread and butter of our applications are happening. Certainly, Andre, if you want to get a hold of me, let me just type my email up on the screen here somehow. This is my email. Go ahead and email me. I'll get you some credibility testimonials. I can give you a whole pile of those. Public facing sites is a little more of a challenge, but certainly I've got testimonials all over the place. So today we work with different user groups. Each group connects to its own database. Is this possible in the same Wakanda server? Interesting question. Marcus, if you want to get a hold of me or send an email into that wakanda@wakanda.org, I'd like to understand your situation a little more deeply before I answer. Okay, is there an expiration date on the free classes? Not that I know of. So, Goran, don't slack off. Go ahead and keep going at them, but I've not been told of an expiry date, and I would be surprised if we do make those expire. Probably they'll be due for an update soon. What they do with the updated version, I have no idea. It's got a question here about scaling Wakanda. Is there horizontal scaling built in? At this point, it's not an out-of-the-box operation. Of course, you can take your engineering prowess and scale things out. A few different options for you. Obviously, you can put a load balancer in front of it. You can get into multiple instances of Wakanda communicating between each other with a method called add outside catalog. And then there would be options for you to programmatically work towards some sort of horizontal scalability. What I would say is it's a question that we are interested in. I don't know that there's a ton of work being done on it right now, but you would be wise. One thing we are doing is we're doing performance benchmarking tests. So we'll be able to share with you fairly soon exactly what you can expect to get out of a Wakanda server. You know, if you're putting together a very robust server, I think a lot of people would be surprised with the traffic that one server can actually handle. So it might be a way out in your needs, uh, to actually worry about horizontal scaling. But uh, we actually have been talking about putting together an example of how you would scale Wakanda in a horizontal basis. So you can keep an eye open for that, but I don't have anything to offer you at this particular moment. So that gets through the questions. Oh, we've got a few more. Hold on. So how scalable is the web server? We'll have an answer. It's easy for me to say it can go this far. What really matters is the use case, and we're going to put out not only performance benchmarks that are generic, we're going to actually try and set up real user scenarios where we'll be integrating with a service that helps us mimic real world usage cases, because you can have a heavy user or a light user, and we're going to have completely different scalability answers based on how heavy each user is. So we're going to try and really spell out and tell a story behind our performance benchmarking, and give you, you can sort of make some assumptions based on what we're describing. So keep an eye open for that. We're going to try and do a really good job on that so that you can understand what you can expect. So as far as I've got someone asking, do you have to use jQuery? No, you can put whatever front end you want on Wakanda. In fact, we have a lot of these calls that I've been making, ds.person and query and all of these things. On the client side, they're what we call the data provider. And you can embed just the data provider in any page you want as well. So say, for instance, you enjoy Famous, but you also really appreciate the work we put into the data provider and all of the rest calls that it's generating for you, is you can have the best of both those worlds. So what you want to look at is how do you embed the data provider only into your JavaScript page, and that will give you another whole realm of possibilities. Okay. Okay, so Famous, it's famo.us. It's a new JavaScript library. They're big on animation. I had someone ask, what is it exactly? Can this work with CouchDB on the back end? With REST, you can do whatever you want. I would suggest give the Wakanda DB a chance. I think you'd be pretty impressed. But again, that REST interface can give you, and we can basically tie into any database using HTTP. It all depends on your implementation. And what I would say is, if you're thinking of CouchDB and it's a brand new project, I'd do some extensive investigation into the Wakanda DB, and I bet you'll find that it'll offer what you need. Backward browser compatibility. There are minimum browser requirements for our client front end. They're not terribly restrictive. They're on our website somewhere. Unfortunately, I don't know them off the top of my head. Can you integrate JavaScript animations that were created in Adobe Edge? I don't see why not. From what I know, Adobe Edge works off web standards. That's really the question, is it web standards? Because if it is, we can work with it. So that, are you supporting Canvas in your client-side programming? Yes, absolutely. Feel free to use it. I did a demo 2 years ago with Canvas, actually, and works like a charm. So that looks like the questions for today. Really appreciate everyone coming out. Stay tuned for our next webinar. It's going to be on WebSockets. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to show you how to set up not only a client for WebSockets, but a server, and we'll be synchronizing data between different browser instances. So that'll be exciting as well. Don't have a date for that yet, but our marketing team will make sure that you're on the list for that, and that'll be more of a training focused on one specific topic type of webinar. So we haven't done one of those in a bit, and I look forward to it. So everyone have a great day. Like I said, if there's anything we can help you with, just get a hold of us. We're definitely interested in working with people who have serious projects. If you find yourself in need of resources, we have support contracts that are available. We have consulting engagements that we can embed someone into your team, and we've got training. You let us know, whatever it takes to get you successful with Wakanda, we're here to do it. Take care.